I won a lot of paintball events, but you know, having that kind of pressure, there was a lot of pressure.
The NXL Texas Lone Star Open is the biggest professional paintball showdown west of the Mississippi. In 2022, Tampa Bay Damage ended their decade-long drought with an epic win over Edmonton Impact in one of the closest games the sport has ever seen.
So in that moment, I was ready to go. I wanted the opportunity to win the tournament for all of us, for the team.
Edmonton Impact's going to win this game here. I think they have enough bodies. Is Jacob Edwards going to be able to hold him off?
Jason's the type of guy where he's like, no matter what, I'm going down with the ship, dude.
We have a no point. Going to be going to one-on-one potentially.
One-on-ones.
Watch how it all went down and get an inside look into the top teams during the most recent episode of Defining Moments, only on GoSports.com.
I hadn't done it in so long, and this is my team, you know what I mean? So it meant a lot, dude. It meant a lot just to see that boy hit that shot, dude. That was crazy.
Way to go, boys. Dynasty, let's go, boys.
Welcome to Go Sports Live. I'm Matty Marshall, and we got something special for you guys today. It's the preview show for the upcoming 2023 NXL Lone Star Major going down next weekend, actually, April the 28th through the 30th. And we got a legendary list of heavy hitters out here to discuss and break down the 4 brackets in the pro division. It should be a lively conversation and lots of insight from, honestly, some of the best ever to do it. So we got Roy Richard. Played for a laundry list of top teams over the years, currently helping lead the charge on the 10-man front with Cap Factory. We got Rusty Glaze, former coach of San Diego Dynasty and an all-star player, also for a laundry list of top teams over the years, like Excessive, Infamous, Dynasty. And then we got a Hall of Famer, a Hall Icons, brand new, just dropped. And Todd Adamson was one of the very first inductees. Todd Adamson also played for all of the best teams back in the day, currently coaching the Killers in semi-pro and also helping lead the charge for Chicago Aftershock in 10-man. It's going to be a fun one. So going to get these guys here in the conversation and looking forward to breaking these brackets down. We're going to have Rusty Glaze. He's going to be breaking down Group A. Todd Adamson's going to be breaking down Group B. Roy Richard going to be breaking down Group C. And then we're all going to kind of combo on Group D and talk about these battles. So let's bring these dudes in here. How you guys doing this morning? Rusty, how you doing,
Ready
bud?
to go. Good, man. I'm excited to talk about some paintball.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been there, done that at the highest level in many different facets, coaching, playing, running teams, and it's this should be an interesting conversation. Roy, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Excited to have some conversations. I still love paintball, still play it, still watch it, and I love to talk about it and dork out on it. So I'm looking forward to it.
And Todd, how you feeling this morning?
Good, buddy. Doing good.
Okay, so let's just let's start it out by just having a little general conversation here, just about the state of pro paintball right now. Here, heading into the second event. Obviously, we can say the elephant in the room. It's more the dragon in the room. Is the fact that San Diego Dynasty has just been so incredibly elite and dominant since the COVID break. And when we came back from COVID at the end of 2020, they've won 7 of 13 events. Considering that every single pro team, including the relegated DMG, who no longer exists in their current in the fashion that they did before, everyone made Sunday last year. We only had one team not win a game at the first event. It's getting hyper competitive. The fact that Dynasty is so dominant is pretty impressive, but there's a ton of stories that obviously we're going to be discussing all year. We're going to talk on this show. So Rusty, we'll start with you before we actually get into breaking down these brackets. What are your thoughts on the state of pro paintball right now?
I feel like it's always interesting as a sport evolves. They're always tinkering with how to do it. Now they've cut down to like one layout release is like the big change this year to see how that affects things. But it's interesting that they're always tinkering with these things, thinking it's going to sort of change the the landscape a little bit, but it really doesn't in a sense. You know, all the pros will cry, "Oh, I want 2 practices and whatever," but you know, all it means is they're going to just work a little harder. They're going to have to shave some things down and be efficient in their practice. But to me, the landscape's always interesting that the league is always trying to sort of tinker with the format. You know, baseball is like very traditionalist. Like they recently just made changes, but they didn't make changes forever. Whereas paintball, I feel like, is always sort of looking for the right formula. And that's sort of the landscape that I see.
But it is interesting because no matter, I mean, it's, you know, we saw a youth explosion kind of during the you know, the what is called the, in some, for depends on who your version of the golden era, but in the mid 2000s, when all you guys were out there winning tournaments, we had so many different changes, but you know, we still have these, you know, look at what the dynasty guys are doing, and then you look at these new teams that are coming in. We got grown men out there. You know, we thought this tournament, the tournament paintball is going to be overtaken by, you know, 18-year-old 5'5" blazing fast kids, and that didn't happen. Roy, what are your thoughts on the state of pro paintball right now?
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about it now is how hard the pro players are working. You know, they're focused on their athleticism, working out, nutrition. You know, things like that weren't at the top of conversations when I first started playing, right? The fields were different and the format was a bit different, but I really enjoy seeing, you know, how much work everyone's putting into it. You've got guys like Greg Sewers and Patty Gleason who are become certified trainers, you know, Scott Kemp, who are trying to build workouts for paintball players. And so that's really cool to see. You know, to touch on what Rusty said, you know, the league tinkering and kind of making adjustments year per year. Right now, the one layout practice or one weekend on the layout, I don't really like that too much. You know, these guys are professional athletes. They're going to be out playing anyway. It doesn't really give an advantage, I think, to the teams that can afford it. Now they're just doing 4-day practices, right? Whereas before, if the layout's available, the teams that are more regional, like the ML Kings and the Columbus Level Ups, they can practice, you know, the layout as a team multiple weekends, where teams like Dynasty and Impact got to fly guys in from all over the country. So I don't necessarily think that really benefits anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's always an ongoing conversation as far as things that are, you know, again, tinkering with little things here or there. You know, Rusty, you made the baseball reference, and that has been a little bit of a revolution going on in that sport, a pro sport that's been around for, I think, about 130, 140 years as it stands right now. And they're still trying to figure out what's going to be the magic for them. Now, Todd, you have been around for a long time, even longer than I have with my gray beard. We're both some gray beards sitting out here. So you've seen the revolution in the game, you know, starting in the woods. But then even heading into the mid 2000s, you were on a core component of an Ironman team that won championships and won tournaments, and saw this whole transition. What are your thoughts? I mean, you're coaching the Killers now, you're playing 10-man again. I mean, you've seen it all. You know, what are your thoughts on the current state, you know, as we're about to break into these 4 brackets and these 20 pro teams, the best teams in the world?
Well, personally, I was at the end of last year contacted by a couple of people in the industry asking my opinion on the layout deal, right? And I am 100% for no layouts, right? So I pride myself on, as a player, trying to outsmart the other person. Now, again, I play 10-man now. I played 10-man, 15-man when it started, right? Big fields. Now this game is evolving, smaller box, less options, more athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it comes down to the coach and the players I think there should be I feel there should be no layout at all. You show up, you can practice, you pay your money, you can practice that Wednesday or whatever the deal is. And your coach and your players have to figure out how to win on this field. You know, you have different caliber. It's chess. You got You got kings, queens, you got a rook, you got some pawns. You know what I mean? You got different skilled variations, just like you said. It's not all kids that have evolved still into this. You've got some older people and some more veteran people, we'll call it that are able to do certain jobs in the game, and you need that complement to make it all work.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a fan of blind layouts. I think that adds a vast complexity, but we do have some diversity of opinion here. Roy's like, no, we should go back to having the 2 practices. And you're like, no, let's just forget all that. We need no layouts. Let's just go to completely blind layouts. But again, that's paintball, man. Everyone's going to have, especially people experience, they're going to say, oh, okay, here's my point, and here's the basis for my argument, which we could probably dive into and talk for an hour. But let's jump into these brackets. So, after the first event and the dust settled, it's still San Diego Dynasty at top. I mean, Dynasty is just looking absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's really not enough pomp and hyperbole that I can use to summon out of my repertoire of words in order to describe how amazing Dynasty has looked during arguably the most competitive era that we've ever seen in the game. Rusty, and we're going to give you Group A, and you coached that team for a long time. They're obviously, again, we have to talk about who's going to be taking down Dynasty when you're in the bracket with San Diego Dynasty. So it's Heat, Infamous, Notorious, and Uprising at this point right now with how well they're playing, and even talking to, how the practices have been going. I mean, Dynasty is just curb stomping people right now for the most part. They barely even ever dropped games in the prelims. You've also gone and done some homework on the numbers. So let's throw it to you right now. What are your thoughts on this bracket and Dynasty's dominance?
So I'm gonna work this. I'm gonna work through this bracket from the bottom down. Like you said, we could spend all day talking about Dynasty, and I'll get into some interesting things going on with them. Obviously, I have a lot of background there, but I'm going to start with some of the lower tier teams, and we'll start with Uprising. Obviously they didn't have a good result. These guys have been around for a long time. They're sort of the bottom of the middle, so this was a bad result for them. Finishing 18th is not a great result for a team that's been together 40 or so events for some of the core guys. Yeah. So, and this doesn't help. You go from taking 18th in the first event, and then you're thrown in a bracket with Dynasty, Heat, Infamous, who's like a mid-level wild card boss, and this new team, Notorious, who you have no homework on. So it's not the greatest scenario for them to be put into this situation. And coming off last year, they had 10 players. The first event, they only rostered 7 guys. So they were already like tight on, how many guys are going in. So that can get you a bit winded if you're not conditioned for that type of play. You don't have enough alternates to go in and give you a break, So Graham Arnold's going to play a line share of the points. Some of these guys are going to get worn down a little bit. So unless they change the, if some guys Tommy Tucker was missing at the first event, and he's been a guy that's been 40 events deep with them, some of these core guys. So unless those guys are coming back, that's a big gap to fill with players that you're comfortable with, and you're bringing in guys that you're not comfortable with. So these guys haven't beat anyone above them. They haven't beat Heat, they haven't beat Dynasty, and they haven't beat Infamous. So if you're trying to make the middle, that's a very tough situation when you haven't beat anyone above you. So they have to, not only are they shorthanded, now they're uphill against teams that they typically don't beat. They're not exchanging barbs with these guys, So it's not a great outlook for them, I do like those guys. We practice them once. They're really great guys, but honestly, they are where they are because, their situation. They're sort of isolated in the Northwest. The talent pool might be a little slimmer than areas like California. So
they have a new owner right there. They do have some challenges. The thing with Uprising is that, typically when we intro them and they're about to play a game, I'll talk about their inconsistencies because, over their history, they have beaten some of the top teams. Their problem is, and they've made some Sundays and they've made a couple runs out of, getting, making a little progression on Sunday. But the problem is that they can't string the wins against the top teams together, particularly when they do make Sundays. And then they also are just super inconsistent in the prelims. I mean, sometimes they'll go out and lose to a team they should beat on paper because of the core of that experience. And then they'll end up, getting a win against somebody that, based on what we just saw, so just the consistency isn't there. But that team is solid. I mean, if you look at, Joel Eaton and you look at Borromeo, Graham Arnold, Creek, I mean, Pankoff is one of the newer players on that team. He's been around for a little bit now, a couple seasons, but I mean, they're skilled. It's just that I've talked to their coach about this as well too. It's a mystery as to why they're inconsistent. Let's move on to Notorious.
I would just say one thing on that is it's probably layout dependent. Like when they're good, like I've seen them on a layout and I'm like, man, they're playing good. They're shooting a guy or two on the break, pretty consistent, and the layout sort of plays to them, then they could be good. But then the next layout doesn't play to them. So they don't know how to really adjust their style to every layout. I would say that would definitely be a factor. And
they save a lot of points. Their 2s and 3s are pretty awesome in the scramble. They do save a lot of points. And you know, we'll say just kind of as we don't really know how this layout's going to play because it just dropped. We're going to find that out this weekend. But looking at the layout, there's no back bunker on the snake side. It does look, talking to some people preliminary and people looking at it, that the snake side could feast out there. There's also a ton of bunkers on that D side as well too, and you know, some bricks up the center. So I think that after a little bit of a slower field, this one's probably going to play a little bit faster. We'll see based on some of those spots, can you actually, you know, cross it up when things aren't looking good for you in your low body situation. So we just kind of got to put that out there. This could be a field where snake guys, good snake players could feast. So yeah, let's move on and talk about Notorious. Obviously brand new pro team here, Rusty. They just got here. Not a bad look though at the first event. What do you think about Austin Notorious?
So I mean, they went 1-3. They beat the Brooklyn Bears, notably. You know, those guys went on to make Sunday and be in it. They made it to out of the Ochos and made it to the quarters. So that's a good win. At least they came out with something. But, you know, the pro division is a grinder. You come off winning your semi-pro and you make it to the pro division. Then you get in there and you're like, this is tougher than I thought it was going to be. You know, there's other teams like Uprising that have been grinding it out for so long with not a lot of results. So what I think is good for this team, interesting enough, they've never played any of these teams. So they're sort of a wild card, as in they're in a fresh bracket, which is great as a team because if you look at this bracket, yeah, it's tough, but you're a new team. So what do we need most? Development. Chances of winning is not going to be high. Chances of getting to Sunday is our goal. But like, look at this bracket. You get to play Dynasty, the reigning champs. You get to play Houston Heat, which is a top 4 boss. You get to play Infamous, which is like an Ocho wild card. You know, they're always making it in through the middle. And then you get a game against Uprising, who's been there a long time, and they also won their semi-pro and went pro. So I think it's a great bracket for a young team because they really get to test themselves and, you know, not a lot to lose. They can go out and try and put their best game against these guys. And they're essentially starting on Sunday because they're playing 3 Sunday level teams and sometimes Uprising. So for them, this could, if you take the right perspective, you're getting Sunday play experience-wise as a developing young team. That's the way I would look at it if I was coaching these guys. Is like, we're getting the experience that we need to learn from so that when we get to Sunday, these are the teams that are going to be there, and we need to learn how to play against them.
With Notorious, I'm hoping that Michael Kovar stays with that squad, former X Factor core member, and he's elite. So, you know, he's a big part of that team, you know, talking to people that play against them, but they also have a lot of emerging potential stars on that team. Ty Bateman, Anthony Bowles, he played for X Factor for a minute. Archie Barnes Jr., he's a hell of a player. And then Mark Franz Jr., he's a hell of a player too. So, but when we have a team like Notorious get here, every single team from the bottom to the top is looking for elite offensive threats to emerge, and then elite players as 2s and 3s that can save points, make the right decision in the scramble that happens when all the plans are out the window and you just have to play paintball out there and you know, play that chess with guns. And so I'm excited for him because, Rusty, I totally agree with you. I looking at this when you're like, it's a tough bracket, but we're about to get a ton of experience here because, like you said, with Infamous and Heat and Dynasty in the prelims with Notorious and Uprising, yeah, man, you're about to get some, you know, basically Sunday type experience, not the Sunday pressure, but, and yeah, if you're looking at the performance that they had at the first one, they did go 1-3, but a win at your first event, just any win at all, is huge. And the Bears are pretty legit. We'll get to them in a little bit, obviously. And they kept the games close. You know, they're plus minus. They overall 11 points for, 14 against for the prelims, only a -3. Not bad at all. I mean, they lost by 2 to Impact. Barely lost to Level, beat the Bears by 1, and then lost the ML Kings by 1. Those are some close games on a slow playing field that kind of takes some paintball knowledge because you really had to dig in and think during some of those longer points. Let's move on to Infamous. I love that you're doing this bracket too, Rusty, because you know Dynasty very, very well. You played on them, played with them, coached them, and then also, you know, you played on Infamous forever too, and you played against Heat. So you definitely know these teams very well. What are your thoughts on Infamous?
So Infamous, their last results at World Cup was pretty horrible. Like I follow them still, you know, I'll talk to Brian Fow and we kind of keep up with what Infamous is doing and everything. They took dead last at World Cup. So then you hit the off season and you're like, what are we going to change going into the next season? And really, I mean, they lost Cody Minkowski, they lost Harrison Fry, and those guys went to top level teams. So you lost guys that are top level. Essentially, you're saying those are top caliber players. One went to Dynasty, which is the top team, and one went to X Factor, which is another, you know, I would say tier 1 team. So you have blue chip players that just left you. What are you doing to replace those players? And I don't think they did a strong enough job to, in a sense, replace those guys. Now they went out and got Joe Barrett. It's not a bad pick. Sam Silberg and Ben Challenger. I like their picks, but I don't think they replaced the caliber that they lost. So that's sort of my opinion on the roster changes. Is they probably they needed to go out and get a difference maker. If you're sort of an Ocho team, that just means you're 2-2 in the bracket. You need to be 3-1. You need to try and win your bracket to get out of, skip the Ochos. Keep playing the Ochos, then you have a chance to lose there and you add the extra game. So what that means is you need to stop being a 2-2. So what do you need to stop being a 2-2 is you need a guy that can make a difference. I think they lost some of the guys that can make a difference, and then they didn't gain as much firepower in a sense. I mean, Cody Minkowski was on the team for almost 40 events that he was on the team. That's a core guy to like lose out. Now you're adding these other guys are good, but good guys, even like you can add a top tier guy and they're not, it takes some time to be molded with the team to understand the dynamic. So to lose a 40 team, 40 events for him, and Harrison had, you know, he probably had 37 events. So that's a deep run with those guys. So it's hard to replace.
Yeah, Infamous is in an interesting position. Legendary team. It's been some years since they've won a tournament. They do historically well in Texas for some reason, particularly if it's raining. And hopefully it's not going to at this one. But we just talked about every single team needs elite threats out there. So either you buy those guys and bring in proven elite threats, or you hope that they evolve. Now Harrison Fry evolved into an elite threat because that dude played as much or more paintball than pretty much anyone on planet Earth, going to multiple continents and playing in tons of different leagues in South America and Australia and Europe. And I mean, that dude's always on a plane. Maybe Ryan Greenspan has more miles, and Marcelo, that's about it. So that's why he ended up, you know, his talent level and his desire got him to that elite threat. But then he gets poached by Dynasty. It's hard to say no to Dynasty. And they had lost Greg Sewers 2 seasons ago. So when they were, 2 years ago, Infamous was at the top, second overall. And then they lose Greg. That was a big hit. No one really filled those shoes last year. And then, so yeah, we're looking at some of these young killers on this squad. They get Zach Painship back. They get Jonah Jamrose. These guys have worked through some injuries. They got Tim Brussel back. He's a missile. Nate Schrader's coming back from a multiple year long of shoulder problems he's had, and he's back at 100%. Thomas Taylor's still getting it done at 41. Sam Silberg, he was the elite threat on the D side for level. So we'll see. It's a constant rebuild for them, and they're just, it's like Travis is basically saying, all right, guys, I'm giving you what you need. I need somebody to step up, be all-star, man. If you want to win tournaments, you need to have, out of the roster they have, 3 of those dudes should be considered all-stars. But now we have to see that. We know, paintball and every professional sport is, what have you done for me lately? And if you're looking at how they did the last one, 9th place, they made a Sunday, but they lose to the Hurricanes in the wild card round in a incredibly long game, meaning only 1 point was scored. It was 1-0. It was crazy. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Rusty. Infamous is just awaiting a hero who's going to step up on that roster, and they need a couple of them to do that. And I do think that those guys, we've seen bright shining lights out there. Some of their missiles have been a little bit of glass cannons though, and dealing with some injuries. So hopefully those guys can stay healthy. That's a big part of it too, but carrying a ton of guys on the roster, which also can be problematic to get guys reps to get them used to that. So, and they have their hands full because they're in the bracket of death potentially. We will see, as we kind of talk through some of these brackets. Let's move on. Let's talk about Houston Heat. What are your thoughts on Heat?
It's an interesting team because like they won an event, and when Fedorov came back, it was right before Dynasty kind of went on their run. Tyler Harmon just joined the team. Fedorov came back, and then they were hot that event. I actually, during that event, I texted Dalton and I said, man, you're going to have a problem on your hands over here on the D side with Fedorov. Like, he's just feasting on people. He's laughing and giggling. Like, I could tell they were going to get deep in the tournament just by watching some of the prelim games and the mode they're in. But they've turned sort of stale. Like, they get Damage, Impact, and Dynasty typically have their number. So, like, those are the other teams that are in the runnings for the either winning or being in the finals. If you can't get past those teams, you are where you are. You're going to be making 6 out of 9. You're going to be in the semis most of the time. You're going to get past the sort of mid-level bosses that are making it in, but you're sort of the bottom of the top tier at this point. And it's an interesting thing because they have guys on their team that have been 60 events deep with the team. Like, they have a strong core of players that have been on the team a long time. So that begs the question, do they need to bring in some fresh killers? I don't think, in my opinion, they went out and got enough. When everyone else was grabbing players, they have the capability of grabbing players, but they grabbed the player from ML Kings. They grabbed
Connor Kelly
from ML Kings. Could be a great player, but does that give you the edge that you need over these other teams that are stacked? I don't think so. I think that gives you more of a hopeful, but you still are you going to pull out Chad George and put in Connor Kelly? Those are the questions you got to ask. So when it comes down to it, what are you missing? Like, you don't have Mishka, who's a core guy, and he hasn't been making it to events. So you're missing a powerhouse player that's like an intelligent second line player that can close those tight points for you. So you're missing sort of, I don't think they did enough in the offseason when other people were making moves, in my opinion. I think they need to look hard at themselves and see what they need to do.
Yeah, the thing with Heat is that Heat doesn't like to make roster changes. They won 2 World Cups in a row before Dynasty started their most recent run. And the team is definitely stacked. It's Houston Heat. They didn't win an event last year, but did incredibly well overall. We started calling that team, the most consistent team in the game because they made every single Sunday. They didn't have one blow up, but they didn't seem to have that final punch needed to win a tournament. The one finals they did make last year, they got blown out in Philly by Dynasty. I love Connor Kelly. I think that kid's going to be a star. But how many reps can Todd get him? Todd Martinez coaching, he's got himself a little bit as every coach of these top teams does as far as trying to get people in the mix. But man, that's if they get a couple guys clicking, that's a hell of a starting roster, whether it's Connor or Chad George, and then, they got Fedorov, Tyler Harmon. Jesus, that isn't a pretty amazing team. Monville's been incredibly consistent recently. Ryan Moorhead's an MVP caliber performance type guy. He's won an MVP to help him win a World Cup. Ronnie Dizon, they got the missile up the center. That team's stacked, dude. So, but
I think they need more. I think they need more Ryan Moorhead. I don't think they utilize Ryan enough. He's very versatile. He could play either side. He could play weird. Like, if this middle's kind of weird, he can play into places like that. So I would like to see them utilize him more. I think he's a very good player. So if they utilize him, they'll have some good chances.
Yeah, I would like to see Ryan Moorhead more too. I'm sure Ryan would like to get some more spins. Again, it's just tough when you have the guys that they have. It's tough to get everyone spins, man, and then to figure out what you're going to go with on Sunday, because they're always there on Sunday. So they did win the second event a couple years ago. They're overdue for a win. Let's move on and talk about Dynasty here. Mm-hmm. Really nothing going wrong with them, and bringing they lose Dalton in the offseason, and then they bring in Harrison Fry and Chris Shear, and those guys get a win right away. So there's not much more hyperbole I can pull out of my bag of tricks here to describe how badass these dudes are playing.
It was interesting because I'm still in the team text and I'm following along with the conversation. So when they're like dropping or removing players from the team text that are leaving the team, but like really on paper, you lost Dalton, you lost Kyle Spica, who was kind of on the back burner in the season. So I understand why he moved on, but still he's a heavy hitter player and he had a lot of history with the team. You lose Dalton. he goes and gets a bag. Both these guys go and get paid, so they didn't, they made good moves, but in the sense of you're looking at the team, you're like, okay, you lost 2 good guys. Then you didn't lose Oliver. It's Oliver. So he came for the event of World Cup, but then he's not going to come play the whole season. And he played great at World Cup. So you lost him in a sense. And then Damian was sort of a bench player that they're trying to develop. And I don't know exactly why he's not around, but obviously you lost 4 guys off your championship run team, which most teams would be like, okay, well, what do we do or what's going on? And they kind of lost them in the timing of like when these guys are making their late off-season shifts, like Dalton all of a sudden is leaving. Well, you got to start making moves of what you're doing. So I think Skinny did a masterful job picking up Chris Shear. Super consistent Dorito player. His style of play fits great. He's an adult. It fits great with the Dynasty guys. Patient, knows when to attack. Like it fills in great with what they needed on that other side and replaced Dalton pretty well for balance over there. And the Harrison, he's a wild card. I didn't even know they can utilize him anywhere. I just don't know where they're going to fit him in because he has a lot of versatility, but he's going to have to really fight for his position to get roster time because they're just so loaded. Like you have so much power that you can put on the field, and their roster, when I was coaching, there's times where I was like, we have 5 snake guys and like 1 Dorito guy. Like we're very unbalanced. Now it's very like you have the guys that are going to be in the finals. Ryan, Archie, Marcelo, Blake, Chris Shear filled in great for the finals at the Sunshine Open. Yosh, these guys that are your reliable guys that have a lot of brains. Then you have all these extra weapons. Like if the layout gives you a challenge, you have Urena who's going to go stick and bunker people. Alex Frazier's not afraid to go get his hands dirty any direction in the field. Arturo's a missile that you can throw if you need to get in somewhere quickly. Like their versatility on their bench gives them so much flex that they can, that's essentially how they're mastering these layouts is they have so much versatility in what they could throw at a layout. So they could just be like, this works and this player works. So it's strong, man.
Yeah, 0 chinks in their armor right now. So Rusty, thank you so much for that breakdown. We got to move along here.
I want to one last shout out. When I was doing this data, Ryan Greenspan, Alex Frazier, and Yosh Rao have checked in over 100 events with Dynasty. That's crazy. I didn't find any other teams that had 100 events logged. They're in the Century Club. That's nuts. So just to give you how much experience is on that, 100. Ryan had 103. Yosh and Alex had 100 each, missing random events. Alex missed one for I think a birth or COVID at one point. And then you have Blake and Blake at 56, Marcelo at 39, who's so close to Oliver was 41 events logged. And this is like PSP, X-Ball. It doesn't count all the 7-mans of an insane amount of events these guys have played. But Oliver at 41. So Marcelo's close, will this year surpass Oliver. Just to give you an idea of how core these guys have become. You think Dynasty, you think Oliver. Well, Marcelo's just about to surpass him, and Blake already has. So that's so much firepower in how many events these guys have attended together. That's impressive.
But hey, man, they're winning tournaments of 40. They're rewriting what's possible out here, and it's a giant inspiration to everyone. I mean, if you're out here playing paintball, yeah, man, like you can be elite at 40 and be the best in the world, and that's exactly what San Diego Dynasty is doing. But Jesus, what a very unique and blessed group of individuals. Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch to see who can knock them off the pedestal. So yeah, man, thank you for all that work. Obviously, we're going to touch base with you. Let's bring everyone in here, kind of talk about this next bracket. Roy, any thoughts on that bracket A before we move on? I know we got a hard out for a couple guys, so we got to keep things moving here. We're going to be having Todd break down bracket B. But yeah, just Roy, thoughts on bracket A and anything you got for us?
No, Rusty did a pretty good job. I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters in that bracket. Dynasty, obviously the front runner at that. Houston Heat can always step up and win a tournament if they get hot. Infamous is that middle puncher, slides in as a wild card. They have some really talented players. And again, all it takes is a couple to get hot and people to step up and have moments as a team, and you can win an event, right? Interesting to see how Notorious plays in that bracket. The new guys, right? How are they going to step up and play some of these monsters? And Uprising is in like kind of a rebuild year, not necessarily rebuild, but under new ownership and really trying to reignite the fire there. So it'll be interesting to see how they come out and perform the second event of the year.
And then Todd, as we move in here to bracket B, so yeah, just your thoughts on bracket A, and then we'll just jump right into bracket B. You're a Florida guy. Tampa Bay Damage is looking really good, looking like an elite team again. Won a tournament last year. But yeah, obviously with Dynasty Heat, Infamous, big names, the rookies. Your just last thoughts here on Group A.
Well, just like Roy, I'm interested to see what Notorious does. I don't know much about those guys. I've gotten intel from some of the killer guys that I'm coaching, and they say they'll be up and coming. But what a bracket to be to be stuck in. That's a grinder. That's a grinder over there. And Dynasty. I mean, they're just, they're just power, and those picks, like to lose a player, pick a player. Skinny's Skinny's SK's the best coach in the world for a reason, and he knows talent. He knows what it takes to fill those voids, to keep everything, and he knows the opponents, right? He's in it, and it's going to be hard to see something happen different out of that bracket.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into Group B here. We got Damage, Hurricanes, Diesel, Revo, and then Legion. Interesting stories in this bracket as well too. So Todd, what are your thoughts on Group B here?
Well, since I'm following Rusty, and Rusty's the as I call him, the Paintball Almanac. That's a hard act to follow, but I'm gonna give it my shot. I broke them down. I'm going to start with the Russians. I'll do sort of the same and follow suit and work my way back up the tier, as it would be. So Russian Legion, they're dealing with some off-field issues at the moment, but they still attend every event with purpose and pride. They're never to be taken lightly, because they've got core players that know what it takes to win. They're experimenting right now. I've got the luxury to be able to see those guys. They're practicing out of Tiki's and in Tampa, with 4 of the guys obviously staying in America and sort of residing in near Tampa. So they're working out of that field, which is close to me. They've got the 4 original Russians left: Kryl, Malloy, Karslev, and Sergey. But not having the snake Leo
Smotrov
is Smotrov is difficult. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like he's going to get back, for the rest of the season. And they're recruiting, and they're trying to mold and pick up some guys, local organic talent in the Florida area. There's a big base in that area, obviously. Damage, ML Kings, the Tiki's guys themselves at their home field have a pretty big core. The CFP field has a big core of talent. So they've been picking up some kids and working with them to try to figure that out and put it together.
Yeah, with the Legion, it's interesting, right? Is that they're sitting almost bottom of the barrel. The only team that they were able to put a win up against was the Saints, and the Saints didn't. They were the only team to not win a game at this event. It was very interesting how that all broke down. So they're sitting at 19th overall. They had 4 of their big starting 5 at the first event. The only one missing was Smotrov. No Smotrov at this next event too, with a snake-heavy field like this. Now Malloy could feast over there, but some of these newer guys, whether it's McDarby or whoever they end up putting over there, Gallego, whoever gets in the snake is going to really need to complement Malloy. Alexander Burtnikov, former Golden Gun Award winner, overall MVP entire year, and they still have Sergey, and it does look like they're going to get their coach back for this one. So I'm expecting a better performance even without Smotrov, but on a layout like this, not having Smotrov, that could also be pretty scary as well too. But yeah, and then it's just been tough for him, man. But it was interesting that they had 4 of their 5 starting badass dudes who we've seen, fighting for wins the past couple seasons deep into Sunday, and they couldn't even find a way to make Sunday. So yeah, there's a lot going on over there. Let's move on to Revo, another team that underperformed at the first event.
Yeah, I did a little history on Revo. Started in 14 and have yet to win an event, but they're led by Henry Sense and Stephen Amara. They took a third place in Philly last season, and that's their best finish. But they picked up some new players, Benny Caro, and they took Silos Cortez from Damage, and are looking to make finals appearances very soon. I hear they're working hard. They're a gritty team, and they're never to be slept on, but known for playing the gray area. Unfortunately, they had a few of their top players over the years picked apart by big dog owners, and that's how it goes in the professional sport. But their strongs are off the break shooting, and smart paintball has gotten them to Sunday many times. So
yeah, I mean, Revo has made the semifinals 5 times in the past 5 years. They have played roster roulette. They do have Tom Ford as a big money guy coming in, and as an owner now. He's trying to throw some money around in the offseason. They did pick up Caleb Abel from Energy Elite. Man, that dude is legit. And then Silos Cortez has proven that he can contend with the best of the best as well too. They also picked up Geiger last year. I mean, it's just, and yeah, their core is strong, and they've been very productive even with all of the changes throughout the past half decade. But but it's just, can they do it again? With the changes, I think they can. I really like the guys they picked up. I wouldn't be surprised if they go out, with Tom Ford throwing his weight around. He wants to have a winning team. They could potentially go after some guys mid-season as well too. But we're expecting more out of Revo than a 15th and a 1-3. They lost to Diesel by 3, Hurricanes by 2 on day 1. They did beat the Ironman by 2, but then they lost to Heat by 1. Again, slow playing field. Finished 9 points, 4-13 against with a -4. Yeah, we're expecting more out of Revo. What do you think about Diesel? Again, this is to me one of the most compelling stories in the game right now. Mark Johnson coming in hot, ownership going big in the offseason, just getting a insane list of monstrous all-stars, most of them from Impact, but also picking up Kyle Spica from Dynasty. Mark Johnson's going hard right now, man. He's definitely wants to build a winning team. But they went 1-3 at the first event. What are your thoughts on Diesel? I mean, Todd, you've been on top teams, superstar teams, multiple times throughout your incarnation in this sport and been successful there. It's difficult to get that many alpha male personalities on the same page. And it just could take them some time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Diesel is the beginning of this season's big talk, right? So Mark is, he's in it to win it, right? So he's putting his money up, and he's trying to field the best team that he can to because he's a winner, and he wants to, he wants the Diesel name to win events. And him and Greg Pauly, they're Dallas based, and they've been around since 2004. They kept some of their pro guys as well. Mark Baginski and Nate Roberts. I might murder some of these names, but I apologize. Clint Johnson and BJ Herringberg, while also, as you said, breaking out the checkbook and scooping up some big dogs. Alex Goldman, A-Rod, and Spica. Again, the first event won't define this season for them at all, because he's got his hands full. That's alpha male dominant complete team, but they also know what it takes to win, and they'll work together to try to put together a win. And I think their work is going to come. It'll pay off for them. Do the veteran leadership as well. They will all be an all-around finalist team.
I think so too. I think that it's just a matter of time before they get it together. It's typically how it works with these superstar teams. Occasionally they'll come out and do well in the beginning of their story, like Houston Heat did, but that's not really how it normally goes. Completely different story though with the Hurricanes. That is not a team built full of paid superstars, and that is a blue collar baller squad from New Orleans. and those dudes put in the work and fought their way into the pro division. And man, they had a really good rookie season last year. What are your thoughts on the Hurricanes?
You know, the Hurricanes, you know, since 2016 was big in D2, and they've done well at every event since. Now they've earned their way into the pro spot, you know, led by Mike Bianca, a veteran player. Got Stuart Ridgel and Jacob Seawright, Daniel Camp, Andrew Bell, Brett Simpson, and Aaron Pate. That's listed in order of their seniority too, of how long they've been on the team, just to let you know that. They've been having tryouts in the off season for this season. They picked up Nick Ripple, who is a European player. He adds some flair to their disciplined of style of play, right? So they're very disciplined. And like you said, they're an organically built team. They're not a big money team. They didn't build their team off of other people's stealing players or ever how you would say it, right? They play out of their own field in Slidell, Louisiana, and their work ethic as a team is really legit. They rarely make mistakes and always playing tight paintball. They placed in the top 6 twice, and which hasn't been done by a lot of rookie pro teams. Proving their preparation, you know, was a key part of that.
Yeah, they really kind of force teams to play their game, which is incredibly impressive from such a young squad. Now, I say young in their pro experience, but these are not young dudes. These are grown men. They got regular big boy jobs, and they've carved out a niche in this game. I love that. I love the Hurricane story. Those dudes are straight shooters. Mike Bianca is awesome. He's a great paintball mind. He's done an amazing job of help lead that team as the coach. I'm expecting big things out of him. The one thing, though, moving in, if we look at this layout, we got a slow layout on the first one that played in really well to the way that the Hurricanes play paintball, man. They are great at control. And now with this next one, I'm interested to see. I think Nick Ripple could feast on that snake side. I think the pace is going to get ratcheted up here, and then we'll see if the Hurricanes can contend like they did last year. And I think they will. I think the Hurricanes, you know, when we're going to get in some of your guys' picks here, but it did look like the Hurricanes definitely made some of your guys' picks. I think everyone actually picked the Hurricanes to move on to Sunday. Let's move on to Tampa Bay Damage here. We got Tampa Bay Damage with a win last year at the second event in Texas. So defending champs kind of sort of, even though it's going to be at a different facility. But yeah, and then a second place to finish the year last year at World Cup, and then a second place at the first event. They look dialed, picking up Rainey Stanzik. Damage looks like they're going to be at the top of the, you know, a pro paintball again for the foreseeable future. Do you agree or disagree? What do you think?
I agree 100%. Right. So that is their home field is CFP. That's where I coach the Killers. We practice them regularly, and so I get looks at them all the time. And they're successful veterans with that have a lot of OGs, but they also bring in like Rainey that keeps the OGs on their toes, right? A threat to win in every event, especially with the addition of Rainey. They can play fast or slow at any given moment.
Yeah.
Their strong suits are shooting, their gun battling skills are top notch, and they're disciplined to know when not to battle and how to survive. They're well coached by Joey. And they'll be in the mix in almost every matchup that they go against.
Yeah, I agree. So if we can bring everyone in here, and before we move on to bracket C, but yeah, Todd, thank you so much for doing that homework and your thoughts. Again, as a Hall of Famer, always love to hear the legends and what they think, especially with some, with the Florida team leading that specific bracket. So Rusty, we didn't get your picks from Group A. So if you could throw me your picks out of that bracket, and then Todd will get your picks from bracket B, and then Roy, you're going to be taking bracket C, and then we got to say goodbye to Todd here shortly. But yeah, so Rusty, coming out of Group A, who do you got coming out of that bracket?
Dynasty and Heat. It's pretty clear cut based on history. I'm going to go with Dynasty and Houston Heat playing each other for who wins the bracket in their final game. But I'm taking those two teams.
Do you think we're going to see wild cards come out of that bracket? Because if anyone's unfamiliar, we get the top 2 teams from each bracket. That's 8 teams and then 2 wild card teams. So half of the field moves on to Sunday, but you don't want to be in that bottom as you move on because you have to play an extra game. There's a wild card match, and if you want to win the tournament, which has happened twice, but if you want to win the tournament and you're in the wild card match, you have to win 4 games in a row on Sunday against the best players in the world. It gets difficult. Do you see a wild card coming out of that bracket, or do you think that it'll be from a different bracket?
I feel like mid-level teams, if they use the approach from Art of War, know thyself, know thy enemy. You're going against Dynasty on this layout, and you played the layout, and you just think that's going to be tough on this layout in the prelims. Then you got to cater to a style that keeps the points low and the margin tight. You can't try and run with them or run with heat if the layout's going to give that. The last layout was slow, so everyone could keep the points tight. This particular layout, I don't know how it's going to play, but if it plays like where you can get blown out, they got to manage that. They can't try and just go for the win and throw these running down the field trying to tie up the game and lose 3 points and blow out your margin. If they lose the margin against those 2 top teams, their chances for middle against some of these other bracket lineups will be tough. Travis is very smart with like margin and knowing when to close the game out and shut it down. Fortunately, he's going to start, I believe the schedule is Dynasty Infamous right off the bat. So he's got to manage that without knowing, like, I beat these other 2 teams. Now I have 2 tough teams to play and manage that. He's got to go in knowing, like, how to manage what the situation is going to be. If Dynasty comes out and wins a point very quickly, it's like, okay, we got to approach this in the right way. So that's my theory on coming out of the wild card out of this, or for any of the teams, Notorious, Uprising. They're all going to have to manage that sort of situation. Either you're, if you're coming out dominating, keep going with that. But if you come out and you go down 2-3 points, now you got to, like, let's shift gears and manage this situation so we don't get mercied.
It does look like
that's how you master the middle.
Yeah, that is an absolute point of conversation that these people need to be talking about. We talk about this in the show all the time. If you don't manage your margin, if you get blown out, you lose by 5 or 6, you get mercy ruled, well, then you have to mercy rule somebody just to get back to an even spread. Ideally, you want to go 2-2 with like a +3, and you'll be in comfy, and then hopefully you don't have to play in that wild card round. So, Todd, your picks coming out of Group B. What do you think?
Oh, it's going to be Damage and Diesel. Damage will this layout. Damage has the versatility to blow some people out. Diesel, I think, will have their a little bit more continuity, should we say, and they'll start putting things together and making things happen. Alex will go down the snake, nasty like, and it'll be they'll have something to show there.
Yeah, and then Group B could potentially be the bracket of death too. I mean, when you have Legion down as the last ranked team in the bracket with Revo, who again made the semifinals 5 times in the past 5 years, and then Diesel, that could be the bracket of death. Do you see a wild card coming out of this bracket?
If so, I'm thinking it's the Hurricanes. I think the Hurricanes will play tight enough to be the middle of the road, to be smart enough to contain that margin to get where they need to be.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I could see a Legion or Revo doing that, though. It really just depends on how this field's going to play. If this is going to be a fast-playing field, that benefits Legion. That benefits Revo. The Hurricanes have proven that they can dictate the pace of a game, but when there's no back corner bunker on that snake side, man, if you get in there and blow that side open, get all the way onto that side of the field, I mean, it could be curtains. So we will see. I'm interested to see if the Hurricanes can keep up the pace on this one, because we know that they can play on a field like we just saw. But they were able to keep up the pace on some of the faster fields last year. So we'll see. But that is a brutal, brutal bracket. So Roy, now we're going to jump in with you here with Group C. We got Impact, X Factor, Energy Elite, Aftermath, and the Saints. So let's jump into that conversation here. Break down this bracket for me.
Okay. I've got 2 top tier teams in here with Impact and X Factor. Obviously, they're big heavy hitters. Next up, we've got Energy Elite and Aftermath, and both of those teams are kind of that lower tier 2 right now, or maybe upper tier 3. And at the very bottom, we got Latin States, who who have really struggled since their roster blew apart after the first event of last year. So with that being said, one of the interesting things about this bracket is this is almost identical to the Windy City bracket from last year, with the exception of you just swap out Latin States and DMG. Otherwise, these teams, it's the same bracket, right? And out of that bracket, X Factor and Impact moved on. Impact eventually winning Chicago last year. Another interesting kind of note out of this is, Energy Elite and X Factor have only played each other twice over last year in Florida, and Energy Elite has won both of those. So there's got to be some redemption for X Factor in the back of their minds right now. I'll go ahead and start with Latin Saints. Obviously everyone knows what happened the first event of last year. They had an all-star roster. It blew apart, kind of under new ownership management after that, and it was a rough year for them. They finished 19th overall, only missing relegation by 6 points. I think their highest place, they took was 13th, other than the first event, and they took two 20th place finishes last year. They had some, and then Florida, they took 20th again, right? They lost 4 or 5 guys in the off season. Mike McGowan, who was a solid, veteran, experienced pro player, he went over to Ironman. A couple other guys went to semi-pro or stepped away from paintball, and then they picked up Alex Keys, formerly of Ironman, and another older veteran from PC Katana, and Timmy Roberts, and then a semi-pro kid or two. For these guys, watching a lot of their games, they're playing a lot of individual paintball. You see guys just really wiling out and trying to gunfight, the first 30 seconds, and they're dying out of their spots that way a lot. In Florida, they seem to figure that out a little bit, and maybe they did, and slow it down against the Russians, their last game of the prelims, and they seem to play better team ball, a more slow, grinded out style, and took the Russians to overtime, eventually losing them in overtime. But that's a step in the right direction for these guys. If they're going to have success, they need to establish an identity, which to me is, going back to the basics, work on playing team ball, communicating, how to live in those long holds and survive the lull, as I call it in paintball, right? You have the breakout, then there seems to often be a lull when it's 5-on-5, 4-on-4, 3-on-3. And then, whoever makes the first mistake ends up losing. And so those are some of the things that they need to work on, and they need to set some micro goals as well. They can't have the mentality, we're going to go to the next event and win it. Like, unfortunately, that's just not going to happen for these guys. They need to set goals like, let's go out, let's keep a tight margin. Let's not lose by more than 1 point in the entire event. Let's go win a match. Let's go, things like that. They need to set some realistic goals that they can achieve and start to build off of. But I don't see these guys making it out of the bracket and moving on. Next up, I have Aftermath. They had some big changes occur. Mike Hinman, I believe, stepped away before Windy City last year, and they brought in a new coach, Wayne Woodruff. He runs a park, that they all play out a lot, called ASG. And then they finished 8th overall last year. Highest placing was 4th at the Sunshine event, Sunshine State event, and their lowest placing was 18th. Currently, they took 13th in Florida to start the year. In the offseason, they had a significant amount of changes. They lost, I think, 6 players in the offseason. And so they're one of the biggest changes to a roster that I saw. They lost Frank, I'm going to butcher this name, Tommaso. Joe Barrett went.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, it is. And he went to the Bears, and then Joe Barrett went to Infamous. Troy Erickson and Josh Halberg both went to play for a semi-pro team called Ology. Zach Hogue went to a semi-pro team, Blast Camp, and Thomas Kim retiring. But they added some, some talent, right? They picked up Grayson Gladstone, who was on Diesel. And then they went out and, I spoke with Grayson about kind of their offseason and what their thoughts were on the team and their current, mentality. They really wanted to pick up a core group of guys to build off and around that have won some tournaments at a high level. And so they ended up picking up a bunch of guys from the Hunters who play a lot of WCPPL stuff. I think Glenn Forrester has kind of helped groom those guys, or at least they're playing at his field a lot. And so where they're at currently is they're a very, very green team, very inexperienced in the pro division. But they have a lot of young talent, right? A lot of young, talented guys on that team. So they really, really focused, after Florida on being disciplined, surviving those long points that we talked about, worked on communication and closing as a team. That's kind of what they identified as what, caused them to not make it. They played a lot of tight matches at the last event, but went 1-3. Yeah. Let's go on to NRG Elite. NRG Elite is a team that's been around for a little while now. Haven't had too many good showings. Last year they finished 17th overall, with their highest placing being 4th at the Lone Star Open, and their lowest placement of the year was 18th. They're currently sitting in 10th place after the Florida event. They had some changes in the offseason, losing Caleb Abel to Revo. But they replaced him with Louis Betancourt from ML Kings, who's a really athletic, talented player. They picked up a couple semi-pro younger guys from Carolina Crisis and Austin Castor and Hunter Murray. And at the last event, they went 2-2, losing their first 2 games to NYX and Damage on Friday, but then went on to Saturday and really turned it around and beat Aftermath and Uprising, which earned them a wild card spot and move on to Sunday. They have kind of a slow grind out style of paintball. That's what I've seen from them over the last little while here. What I kind of noticed at the last event in Florida, they were playing that same style of paintball, and they'd get up on bodies and then they would stay in that same style of paintball. They weren't putting the pressure on. They were allowing teams that were down bodies to them to kind of dictate the play. And it cost them a couple points where they're up bodies and they allowed the other team to come at them and not just come at them, but like really control the field, right? Standing over the top of bunkers and things like that. If you're going to play that slow style of play, you've got to control when you need to control. That means gaps. That means putting pressure on players, double teaming guys, picking on a guy, stuff like that. And so that cost them, quite a bit out at the event. They ended up playing, I think, the Brooklyn Bears out in the Ochos, and ultimately losing them, getting knocked out. One of the guys on the team that really stood out to me was that Travis Treywick. He was consistently, Treywick, thank you. He was consistently a force for them and won multiple points. And so, seeing the layout, and if that snake, at this next event is dominant, it's going to be interesting to see what he's going to be able to do out there. Next up, I got X Factor. So X Factor is obviously a long-standing veteran team, knows how to win, has won, consistently makes Sunday. Last year they finished overall, or 5th overall. Their highest placing was 3rd at the Golden State, and they finished 5th at Cup. Their current ranking is 5th. They took 5th in Florida as well, right? As far as their injuries going into this event, they don't have any injuries, but because of the 1 weekend layout, Tom Guest had to miss due to work most of the practice this weekend. He might be able to make some time on Sunday, so that may affect how much playing time he gets out at the next event. It's going to depend on how quickly he's able to pick it up, right? And with the limited amount of time he's going to get. They lost Rainey in the offseason, but they picked up Cody Mikowski, and I think that's a real solid pickup. Cody adds some stability to that back line, a veteran guy who can play those longer points, grind out points, and be a difference maker out there and close games out and win those points for them. They went 4-0 in the prelims in Florida, beating Dynasty the last game of the prelims, and then unfortunately they drew Dynasty in the quarters and lost to them 0-3. And I think that happened to them in Chicago as well last year. They drew, they beat Impact in the prelims and then drew Impact in the first match of Sunday and then lost to Impact, who would go on to win the event. I talked to Ryan Brand a bit about this stuff, and they've identified some things. How come they're consistently dominating in the prelims, but fail their first match on Sunday, and he felt that they've played some hesitant paintball on Sunday, and so they've had some talks about that, and they think they've identified an issue for the team and have fixed that issue. And so, they think they have a strong feeling about this next event on how they're going to perform. They think they are playing really good team ball right now. Multiple guys have really stepped up at different times, when they needed to. And so it was making it hard for Ryan Brand to figure out, who his hot hands were at the last event, because everybody was kind of playing good paintball. Last up, we've got Impact. Obviously, Impact's a monster, ultra, like uber talented team. Losing, Alex Goldman and Justin Rabikoff in the offseason. They went out and picked up Dalton Vanderbilt, who is just a phenomenal D-side player, can be a difference maker, at any given time. And they went out and grabbed a young kind of, lesser known player in Tyre Pinillo. He was out of the DMG camp. Just very good kid, high IQ, super coachable, and there's zero ego to him. So the guys have really taken to a liking to him. He's absorbing everything that they're talking to him about. With this team, again, there's so many talented players on it. If it's a dominant snake side, they could throw Axel in there. You may see Tyler get a couple points. You may see Zupa over in the snake side. I know he played Dorito at the last event mostly, but he's also somebody who can go to work on that snake side for him. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see the matchup between X Factor and Impact and how that snake side battle, pans out. Also, they got Zachary, Yakimek back, who's I think someone that's not talked about enough. I think he's a phenomenal paintball player. Very consistent, big brain guy who can win points and be a difference maker out there as well. I talked to Dave Baines a bit, about the current state of the team after losing those guys and bringing in Dalton and that type of thing. Just it can always change the morale of the team a little bit, right? He feels that the guys are in a really good place right now. Everyone's very happy. Not any drama on the team. The egos are not there, and everyone's very, very focused on achieving a common goal of winning an event. So, from a mental standpoint, these guys are in a really good place. They're willing to be there for each other and work hard to get a W.
Yeah, I think that, dude, thanks for the breakdown. Yeah, man, this is an interesting bracket. Saints have and Aftermath have some work to do, rebuilds, and it's difficult out here. So Aftermath going local and Saints doing whatever they can to try to field a competitive roster, which they did a lot better at Cup. But yeah, man, they had a really rough time at the first event. Energy Elite also losing one of their huge attackers with Caleb Abel. But Betancourt could go off on this snake side. I also would like to add Weaver into the mix with Treywick. Weaver's been getting really good. Austin Buffton, he's been handling business out there. And then, yeah, X Factor is back. They had a really rough start to the year last year. And then Impact won 2 events last year and looks like they haven't really lost a step, even losing those dudes. Like you said, undefeated in the prelims, barely lost to Damage in the semifinals in a really close game. Wouldn't surprise anyone. I just did a little hype reel for a video that we're going to do for the event. And I said the safest bet in paintball is that Edmonton Impact is going to be there deep into Sundays. And I think that still is true. So if we could bring everyone back in. I'm not sure if we still have Todd. I know Todd had to bounce here. to kind of get a little bit of discussion going on with Group D. And then, Roy, I know you have to. Oh, it looks like we still have Todd. Todd, you got to go.
I'm okay right now.
Okay. Well, if you start getting hollered at, just let me know. But yeah, so yeah, Group C. Roy, who are your picks to move out of that? And then do you think that we're going to see a wild card out of that bracket?
So my picks are, Impact and X Factor. I don't think since Dave Baines has joined Impact, they've missed a Sunday. And, X Factor is always there on Sundays. Over the last 9 events, X Factor's only missed 1 Sunday. So they should be there. As far as a wild card goes, my 2 wild card picks were Infamous and Hurricanes. But it's such a hard thing to pick, right? That wild card position. I could easily see somebody like Energy Elite coming out of this bracket as a wild card spot, especially, since they beat X Factor the last 2 times those teams have met each other. And, Aftermath's a young team, but they are talented. So if they are fine tuning in it, and just make those small little tweaks, you could see them sneak in as a wild card spot as well. Plus, they all have Latin Saints in there, and sorry, no offense to Latin Saints, but odds of these teams beating, getting at least 1 win from that are high, right?
Yeah. No, for sure, and maybe with some margin too. Again, yeah, not to knock the Saints, but yeah, dude, this isn't kids softball. We're not handing out participation trophies. This is the best of the best in the world. One team's going to get relegated down to the semi-pro division, and we're going to see that obviously there's a crazy battle going on in semi-pro as well too, which we'll talk about throughout the year. But yeah, moving into bracket D here, X Factor and Impact are going to be tough to touch in that bracket. But Energy Elite and Aftermath can play fast, and I think this is going to potentially be a really fast field. So maybe we'll see something there, maybe with margin, might help them with the catch a wild card berth. Moving on to bracket D, I think this is one of the most interesting brackets as far as who possibly could move out of it. Because, I mean, oh my God, dude, New York Extreme looked so good at the first event. And they lose Harris Hussein, or, Harris Hussein leaves the team, cut him, whatever you want to call what happened with the New York Extreme boys losing one of their core members. He's now with Red Legion. But they really stepped up. It was an incredible performance out of them. Went 1-3 in the prelims, beating Energy Elite and Aftermath on day 1. They did lose to Uprising by 1, but that just got them up to beat Tampa Bay Damage by 1. They ended the event losing to Dynasty in a really close game in the semifinals. But Jesus, that was a run. 18 points for, 13 against for a +5, top 4. Yeah, if they can keep that up, New York Extreme will be a top team this year. But if you look who's sitting behind them, the Bears are legit. They brought basically their core back that they started with back lower in the divisions years ago. And that team has been incredibly impressive when they played under the Thunder moniker last year, now changing the name to Brooklyn Bears. Only guy they really kept was GJ Sakaguchi. He had a great first event, but they have offense. That team can play really fast. With the Altamores, Frank Antetomaso, like the Bears could be legit on this layout. MO Kings also like to play fast. They lost some bodies, and they're kind of not reinventing themselves, but they lost Connor Kelly, their all-star, and they lost Louis Betancourt, who helped put them on the map when they first started to play really fast paintball and make some Sundays. At one point, making 4 Sundays in a row. Level, most inconsistent team in the game other than Uprising. They took a top 3 last year, and it's been kind of disastrous towards the end of last year, starting out in 16th, going 1-3. And then you have the Ironman going through a huge rebuild, bringing Shane Pestana back in to help out Nikki, and Mike Paxton's there as well too. They've loaded up with some talent, familiar faces, people that have been watching the game for the past couple years. But they struggled with consistency at the first event when they went basically 1-3. They did get a win against Diesel right out the gate, but then lost 3 in a row, and they finished with a -8 because they got blown out by Houston Heat by 4. So I talked to Shane about the squad with the Ironman. I talked to Pando about Level and Kyle Berry, ML Kings. This is a very interesting bracket. I'm really excited. Out of all the brackets, this one is the most Wild West. Any one of these teams could make it out of this and move on to Sunday, maybe catch a wild card. Rusty, what are your thoughts on Group D here?
Yeah, I think it's a great bracket because it's like when you look at your bracket, I'm talking like when I coached Dynasty and I'm looking at the bracket, you look at this bracket and you don't think, okay, this guy's automatically going to take the bracket. We haven't seen a bracket like that in a long time where you're like 1-2. Unless something tragic happens, that's your 1-2. This one, it's kind of like all these guys have history of making it through the middle, making it to a quarterfinal round. near misses. Like some of their matches are tight where they lose by 1 point. You know, you saw New York Extreme lose in overtime by 1 point to Dynasty, who went on to win the event. So, I mean, they were right there in their play. If you're a New York Extreme looking at this bracket, I look at the bracket like this. You're the tier 1 team. Look at tier 2. Would you rather have someone else? I wouldn't rather have Heat or X Factor, so Bears is not bad. You know what I mean? You work your way that way. Tier 3, I'd rather not have AC Diesel because I know they're a powerhouse team, so I like the draw there. So if you're the top tier team looking down, it's a pretty good draw for them to keep up their role. It's not like they're going to, you know, come in and have to contend with a heavy hitter. But at the same time, you don't get that get ready for Sunday game as much as you do in another bracket. So if you beat all the bottom teams and then you have that final game that preps you for Sunday, you can experiment a little and then get ready for Sunday. They don't, this bracket doesn't have that as much. I don't think this bracket will have a game that everyone's like dying to watch at the end, but I think it's a great bracket.
Todd, your thoughts on this bracket?
No,
who would be your picks?
You know what? The next event when we do this, Rusty's going to go last because he steals everybody's thunder and he just, you know, says everything how it goes. You know, 100% he's last. All right. Roy, you're second. I'm going to go.
All right, copy that.
Right? I already got it. I got it fixed. No, so I mean, it's just like you said, you know, New York Extreme was dialed in, close loss, you know what I mean? And you look down and just look at your possibilities of who you got to play. It's not looking bad for those guys. The Bears, though, are a very tough team. They're an interesting team. They're swinging. Those guys swing. But, you know, ML Kings, they're right in the middle of the pack. Anything could sort of happen in this bracket, I think. I think that Pando and Shane and Mike are going to be re-evaluating what they've done. And with this design and layout for this particular tournament, this bracket could be, it could be a little spun around.
Yeah, I think so too. Because look at the bottom. In some world, Ironman, you know, taking second place last year with slightly different looks on the roster, but not that much though. I mean, they have still some of the core guys they took second place with on that squad in California last year at the 4th event. And then Level, you know, Danny could go off on this snake side. This is a perfect snake side for Danny Schonauer. They are missing Corwin though. He blew his ACL out skiing at the beginning of the year, and he was part of the magic that made him so successful at the beginning of last season and taking that 3rd place. And ML Kings are still looking for their elite threats, so they still have, you know, a lot of firepower. They can play fast. And so as far as picks on this one, man, this is almost a coin toss. I think with the way that you know, New York Extreme's a hype team. They play with emotion and they feed off of recent experiences. So I think that they're going to be tough at this event, and they also can play fast. So I don't think it's going to be a shocker to see Extreme come out of that. But as far as the Bears, ML Kings, Level, and the Ironman, dude, flip a coin. You know, this could go so many different ways. This is a very interesting bracket. Roy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just saw NYX out at the Pro DNA Open out in Nashville, which was pretty cool to see their whole squad come out and play 10-man. And I talked to Telford about it, and they really wanted to get out and have that bonding experience and get a look at 10-man as a whole unit. And so, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, I saw a lot of smiles and that type of stuff. So they had a lot of fun doing it. And obviously coming out, you know, off the strong finish at the last event, like you said, they're an emotional team. So, you know, carrying off those two things, I think they're going to continue on and be really strong at this one. I think NYX makes it out. After that, it becomes a coin flip. Obviously, the Bears, you know, it's layered with some veteran guys on that team from the old Thunder, and so they can show up and play. But, you know, a team like Ironman, backed by Shane Pistana and Mike Paxson, you know, it's only a matter of time, I feel, until they start putting it together and start winning some matches. It could be as soon as this event. It could be later in the year. So they could show up. And then the other two teams, like, you know, Columbus Level, they've shown they can play paintball and they know how to play paintball, but they also shown that they can fall apart real quick. So it's a coin toss for them. ML Kings, they lost, you know, Connor Kelly and Betancourt in the offseason. Those are two killers for that team. I know they still have a decent amount of young talent. How much I don't know. So I'm gonna go with NYX and I think Bears out of this, but it would not surprise me at all if Ironman, Columbus Level, or ML Kings ended up in there instead of the Bears.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun tournament, man. I like the layout. I like the storylines that are developing here in these brackets, and who's going to take down Dynasty. I mean, that's kind of the big story. Damage has been their foe for the past couple events. Is it going to be somebody new? Is it going to be a top team? Are we going to see something? Are we going to see kind of like what we saw at the first event with Extreme stepping up? Is there going to be another name that we're going to be talking about? So before we sign off, last thing that I kind of want to ask you guys about this event, just one compelling story. Rusty, to you, looking at the best 20 teams in the world, getting ready for this second major event here. We're still getting things going here in the season in 2023. What is the most compelling story that we're going to see go down this next weekend that you're most interested in seeing what happens?
I mean, obviously, there's going to be a big focus on how AC Diesel performs because it was kind of a flop the first event. So it's going to see, like, are these guys going to rebound? So that's, for me, I'll pay attention to that. You know, I've known a lot of those players, so it's, can they pull it together and how are they going to perform? So that'll be a storyline that I watch personally.
Roy, as far as compelling stories and, you know, the conversations you had with coaches and other players, or just you personally, I mean, other than Diesel, what do you think would be next up in your opinion?
I think I'm really interested in Notorious and see how they fare in that bracket. You know, how they stack up against Dynasty, Heat, Infamous. I think that's going to tell a lot about where they're at as a team in their second event as their first year pro. The other storyline I'm really kind of curious to watch is, you know, after talking to Ryan Brand with X Factor and feeling like they've identified what's causing them to kind of hiccup on Sunday, I want to see if they can overcome that and push for a deep run on Sunday. I'd like to see that.
And Todd, what do you think, man? Yeah, the floor is yours. Any compelling stories that you personally want to see play out? What are you drawn to right now?
Well, you know, my heart is always with the Ironman because I was an Ironman, and I'd like to see them start to put things together. You know, from their spot to trade places with Dynasty is a little difficult. Okay, but I'd like to see them do well. I think just maybe Roy said it. You know, that it's just going to take a little bit for Shane and Mike to put all the pieces together to start building that franchise to be much more competitive than their placement shows, right? And then of course I'd like to see how X Factor is going to do, because I think X Factor is going to do well. I think it's going to come down to you know, a Damage, X Factor, and a Dynasty in those three toss up. That's going to win the tournament. I'd like to see, and again, I want to, obviously what Rusty said, I want to see how everybody loves everybody to get blown up and torn down, but then they also love a comeback and how they're able to overcome those diversities to put things together and do well the very next event, which would be Diesel, obviously from their placement compared to their talent on the team, and Notorious. You know, they're a good team to watch. I think they'll be exciting. You know, it's going to be, I think the layout is going to really excel some of the more versatile teams that are, you know, they're a little more depth and talented, and it's going to hurt the teams that don't have that.
Yeah, well, it's all going down next weekend. Thank you guys so much for your time. The one story that I'm also super compelled by, just because of how bad they did at the first event and how good they can be, is Legion. I mean, when you're looking at the bottom of the barrel right now, I mean, the fact that Legion's sitting at tier 5 and they're not going to have Leo Smotroff, you know, can those core 4 guys with whoever else they put in as the 5th, it's going to be, you know, probably a list of 3 or 4 different guys. Can they summon the spirit here in a hyper competitive bracket with, you know, Revel kind of similar situation, underperforming with the talent that they have? I mean, Group D is going to be pretty nasty. So in addition, obviously, to all of the stories that you guys highlighted as well. But, man, it's getting really interesting in pro paintball, man. It's never been this competitive, and we've been around forever. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you guys so much for joining us. But mark it on your calendars. Second big event of the year going down here. The best paintball players and teams in the world. Last weekend of April 28th through the 30th, going down in Austin, Texas. So Rusty, Glaze, Roy Richard, Todd Adamson, you guys are some legends. Thank you for all the homework. I'm looking forward to touch base with you guys after the event and see how it all shaped up. And yeah, man, stage is set. The battle's about to go down, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.
With the 2022 NXL season in the books, let's take a look at the hierarchy of merit that materialized in the battles at the 6 events last year. After the dust had settled for the season, 4 dominant teams sat at the top of our sport, names that many fans have become very familiar with over the years, as they have proven, yet again, to be the best of the best. San Diego Dynasty took the #1 spot overall. The boys in blue have been on a historic run for a little over 2 years, as they chalked up 3 wins last season, and they have won 7 of the last 13 events. They capped off a magical 2022 with a dominant victory over Damage at World Cup, which also saw the return of the greatest of all time, Oliver Lang, who earned the finals MVP. Dynasty's potent mix of experience, aggression, and lethal creativity have earned them the right to call themselves the best team in the game, at least for now. Houston Heat sat in second overall, though it has been over a year and a half since they hoisted a first-place trophy. But they have been a pillar of consistency, making it to every Sunday, and the worst they've done is 6th place. Heat keeps losing close games to stop their runs, but their roster contains some of the biggest superstars of paintball. They are overdue for another win, and they have added emerging all-star Connor Kelly to the team to help in their quest. On the other hand, Edmonton Impact was able to ride a small roster to victory at the Open event in Sacramento. In the final 3 games in California, Impact outscored their opponents 18-1. They went on to take Chicago as well, but on Sunday in the Windy City, they had to scrap out wins in close fights en route to their 2nd win in a row. Though they lost 2 of the biggest names in the game, with the offseason departures of Alex Goldman and Justin Rabikoff to AC Diesel, they were able to secure the talents of Dalton Vanderbilt, and Impact's roster is still a murderer's row of all-stars. Tampa Bay Damage, after a 10-year drought, finally brought home another victory in dramatic fashion when the final game in Texas came down to one-on-ones.
Oh, and Jacob Edwards dropped the coast-to-coast shot.
And they did this running 2 different lines, proving the talent and the depth of their roster. But they took a disappointing 15th place in Chicago and got blown out by Dynasty in the finals at World Cup. Damage will still be a huge threat to win events this season, as they were able to get Rainey Stanzik back into the fold to bolster their proven, veteran-led squad. Based on previous performances, these top 4 teams are the big favorites, but there were upsets at every event and all 20 teams made Sunday in 2022. This year we can see new teams rise to knock the old guard from their pedestal. Make sure to tune in all year long on GoSports.com to watch all the professional paintball battles go down on center court.